I worked as an LNA for this nice resident facility in Concord, North Hampshire. The first year I worked there, I volunteered to work a night shift after a long day shift because we were short-staffed. After all the residents went to bed, all the LNAs gathered in the floor lounge to get our books done and up to date. We were in there for quite a while when a light went off at the end of the hall. Knowing this resident most likely needed the restroom, I rushed to her side. When I entered, I saw a black floating mist above her. She was hysterical, pointing to the mist and saying it was here to get her. I am not a religious person, but wanted to calm her down and knew I could not acknowledge the mist above her. It is not unusual for these kinds of things to happen in these types of facilities. I turned off the light and held her hand. We prayed. The mist vanished. I calmed her down and stayed with her until she went back to sleep. I creeped out of her room and went back to the lounge. I reported what I saw to the others, but we cannot report it in our books. I found out that this mist had been seen in several rooms on the night shift for weeks. Another experience, I was working with a night shift LNA that volunteered to work the day shift on my floor. I was friends with him outside of work as we were both writers. It was getting to the end of our shift and we had brought our residents to the bathroom and read them for activities that took place in the basement where most of the administration was located. The other LNA and I brought our last residents to the activity and were walking back to the elevator. We were not walking the stairs, even though it was just one flight up. It was a long day. We saw someone walk out of the bathroom ahead of us and went around the corner to the elevator. I hollered, "Hold that elevator!" We were only seconds behind. We turned the corner, but no one was there. The other LNA and I just looked at each other. There was no place that this person could have gone. It was a dead end. I asked if I was going crazy and if they saw that person. The other LNA agreed. Where did they go? It took forever for these elevators to go from floor to floor, and this time of day, there were tons of visitors and the change of shifts. The elevators would take longer to get back down to the basement. One of our residents turned 100 years old, and she had called me in to read a letter she received from the President of the United States, George W. Bush Jr. at the time. I had a few days off from work. When I returned, I had heard the awful news that she left us in her sleep. The nurse on duty on that floor in our staff meeting read a note that her alarm kept going off. Just then, the panel showed a light going off in that room. I thought it was the roommate. I volunteered to see what she needed. I entered the room and the roommate was nowhere to be found. The light was coming from the empty bed of the resident that passed. I shut it off, thinking it was a fluke. After that, it seemed to be going off minutes after it shut off. I volunteered to go to the empty top floor where we kept the extra supplies to get a new plug. I came back down and replaced the plug. Before I left the room, the light went off again. I removed the plug, but forgot the fail-safe that if you removed the plug for any length of time, the light would go off. Just then, I asked the nurse, "Did anyone leave the window open after she passed?" The nurse looked at the note. "Nope, no one did that. It is not unusual that after a passing in a residential facility, you open the window. It is the belief that it allows the spirit of the deceased to escape." I reattached the plug and opened the window. At the end of my shift, I closed it. The light never went off for the rest of the shift after I opened the window. The next day, there were no reports of that light going off. Me, 14 male, a friend who we'll call Rob, 13 male, and Brad, 14 male, were having a sleepover and at about 1 in the morning decided to sneak out because we were young teenagers looking for fun. We didn't stay out long, only walked around the local town and chatted. We started heading back, already cautious since it was late and we had no idea who it was about until we passed a shop exiting a T-junction towards a local street leading to the house in complete darkness due to streetlights turning off at 1 in the morning. That's when we see a beat-up white van coming around the corner. Brad made a subtle joke of us being kidnapped when the van just stops right next to us. For context, all shops are closed and there is no one and nothing around us. No reason for him to stop. That's when we all processed the situation and ran about 15 to 20 seconds down this long pitch black road towards Brad's house. We stopped, talking about what just happened in a scared manner, and continued to just walk down the short road leading to the house, checking behind us regularly. That's when Rob and Brad see a man walk around the same corner the van had stopped at. No one was around, so we knew it was the guy driving the van. We questioned who and why the man was there, until he dips back around the corner, and about 5 seconds later, the van came whipping back around the corner, and without thought, we began running, taking a right onto a new road. This road has many streets with houses spouting off it, and luckily, ours was the first to the left. While still running, we hear the van getting close and full out sprint around to the street, and Brad and Rob managed to hide behind cars, whereas I stood in shock and watched the van pass by the road at a fast pace before he slows to presumably turn around. However, it is quite hard to make a U-turn on that road. We run around halfway down the street. Brad's house is just at the end, before slowly down to a walk while looking over our shoulders and ahead while questioning what would happen if he caught up to us teens. Brad was shitting bricks at this point and was complimenting ways to escape if he returned, before he and I spot a house light and mistake it for the headlights of the car and begin running again to his house, which was like a 10-second run from our location, and we all rapidly jump in his room from the window. His room is on the bottom floor, and now I am sitting here writing the events. This is all a true story, and we are quite shook up and still questioning about what happened. So this happened about 6 years ago. I was 20 years old and working my first job at a restaurant. I was a dishwasher, busboy. It was a Saturday night and the restaurant closed up. On the weekends, me and another coworker would stay after and clean up the restrooms, kitchen, dining area, etc. My coworker was in the kitchen cleaning up the dishes. Instead of helping him, I decided to get a head start and start cleaning up in the dining area. I put up all the chairs and began to sweep. While sweeping, I was just listening to my music and sweeping, moving the tables and sweeping the rugs like I always did. However, I started to feel uneasy, as if someone were watching me. I tried to ignore the feeling and keep working, but I just felt so uneasy. There were 2 tables across from each other at the end of the hall. One table was next to the window facing the boulevard. The other was near the restrooms, which was table 28. Once I got into a clear view of table 28 is when things started to get a lot more creepy. Out of the corner of my eye, I would see a figure, like a man, peeking at me whenever I would turn and look at that table. It seemed like the figure would quickly hide back into the booth. At this point, I was scared out of my mind. I began to sweat and just overall felt a feeling I can't even describe, but I decided to thug it out and continue to clean up. I guess the spirit, or whatever you want to call it, didn't like that I chose to ignore it. Despite being scared as fuck, it decided to really let me know. So each table has a service button that customers can push to get the attention of the waitresses. As I was getting closer to the table, I heard the familiar sound of the service bell. I immediately ran to the cashier table, as you can see which table was requesting service, on a small screen above where the hostess would stand, and sure enough, it was table 28. I decided to let my coworker know about what was going on. He was in the back, still cleaning up the kitchen, with both headphones on. He saw me go to the back and asked if I finished. I told him what had happened, and he didn't believe me at first. He even laughed at me. Then I told him to get quiet, and he did, and we both heard the service bell going off. We both went to see which table it was, and again, the same table. This time, his face changed from laughing to fear, as he saw that I was now telling the truth. My coworker decided that we should just leave and just tell the owner and manager what had happened. I agreed, and we decided to just leave. The owner laughed and said it was fine. We ended up finishing cleaning up the next morning before we opened. Before this experience, the owner would always joke asking if we had a visit by the ghost yet. I didn't believe him, thinking he was just messing with us. But turns out, before the restaurant was even on that property, was a retirement house where several elderly people passed away. So I guess the spirits of the elderly would often pay a visit. After that, things went back to normal. But, by far, the scariest thing I had ever experienced. Still get the chills whenever I share this story.